Mike, playoff talk is now on the horizon. And when you start to look at, teams in playoffs and, this and that, I have a graphic that I wanted to put up on the screen, kind of showcases the landscape of where these teams are. And we're kind of really just looking at 8 teams right now, in my opinion. So let me bring up the graphic. And the graphic reads like this. You have Michigan up at the top, 8-0, and you can see the remaining games played. You have Ohio State, Florida State, Georgia, Bama, Washington, Oregon, Texas, and that should say Oklahoma there at the bottom. So when you look at these specific teams and everything that goes in it, what's kind of your, early look at kind of the playoffs and, and I wanted to ask people this as well. Should schedule strength matter? Because you have teams like Michigan and even Georgia right now. And I guess you could point to Florida State. Besides their win against LSU, should schedule strength matter? Because the schedule that Alabama played has certainly been daunting.
Absolutely, strength of schedule should matter. When you look at Michigan, that's plays Rutgers, Northern Illinois, Indiana. They play nobody, man. Yeah. Any of these teams listed that you have here on the board will be undefeated with Michigan's schedule. And besides that, it's been kind of proven here lately. I'm sure you've been keeping up with the story. Michigan's a bunch of organized cheaters. I mean, it pains me to say that, but they are. And it's Michigan. Here's what scares me about the playoffs here. I think that Michigan, I don't know why people are so big on Michigan. I think they can lose to Ohio State, not make the Big Ten championship game, and still get into the playoffs. So I kind of feel, and I hope I'm wrong here, Kyle, I kind of feel that there's 2 spaces already reserved for Michigan and Ohio State, no matter what plays out. Unless Michigan loses to Penn State and then loses to Ohio State. But I'm afraid that if Michigan and Ohio State are both one-loss teams, or if Michigan especially is both of them a one-loss team, they're still going to make it to the playoffs. And just something I personally call Big Ten privilege. I don't know what the deal is. They're big market teams. But one thing Bama has working against them is, they haven't lost to Texas. Well, there's a good chance from this point Texas is going to win out of the Big 12 and probably play Oklahoma again in the Big 12 championship game. And then I think they're going to beat Oklahoma the second time. And so Bama having a head-to-head loss against the Texas Longhorns, that may work against them as well. So, so Bama's only hope to get in the playoffs is to go to the championship game, beat Georgia, beat them convincingly, and then get in. And it's not an open and shut case. Bama's going to beat Georgia, man. I've been saying this all year. It pains me to say Georgia's the best team in college football. Even with losing Brock Bowers, they're the best team in college football right now. The only teams in college football that have a chance of beating Georgia are Ohio State and Bama. They're the only teams that can hang with Georgia. I said that this year. I've said it last year. Michigan, I mean, come on, man. They play nobody. At least Georgia's played Florida. At least they played, I think, Kentucky. And they're going to play Tennessee. But, and then they got to play maybe hopefully Bama in the championship game. But Georgia has a tougher schedule than Michigan, in my point. And like I say, Michigan, man, honestly, I've been wondering how they've gotten so good these past 2 years. I don't want to harp on the subject, but they've been cheating, man. That's how they've gotten good these past 2 years. If you looked at this video that's come out, this is organized cheating, organized stealing the plays. This guy, whoever this guy is, stands right beside their coach telling them what the plays are. They've taken this to a whole nother level. But I don't think they're going to be able to beat Ohio State this year. I don't know. But I just feel Michigan can take a loss with their weak schedule, with their organized cheating, and still have a spot reserved in the playoff due to what I perceive as being Big Ten privilege. And Ohio State, too. So, and with Bama, like I mentioned, having a one loss against Texas. If Texas wins out, well, Texas is going to get the go-ahead because they have the win against Bama, which is a good win for him, by the way. And people seem to be all over the Pac-12, like Washington and Oregon. Well, Oregon, I think, right now is also 7-1. I think they're a higher-ranked team than Alabama in the AP and the coaches poll right now. So there's just a lot of factors working against Bama. And so Bama's their only hope is they've got to win out. They've got to convincingly beat Georgia convincingly to get into the playoff. Other than that, it's going to be hard for them to get in because Bama fatigue is real, man. Bama fatigue, SEC fatigue, it's real. It's a real thing. And like I said, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but just by looking at how Georgia's not the number one team in the country right now, I will never know. I will never know. And Michigan's not as good as people give them credit to be. They're beating up on these weak teams across the board. But anyway, as far as going into next year, Kyle, what I see playing out for Alabama, like as far as player turnover and such like that, I can totally see Ty Simpson transferring out. He's got to be he's a good player, man. And, I mean, he's really done nothing wrong at Alabama. Just, they settled on Milroe because he had more experience. And Tyler Butchler's gone. He's definitely going to transfer out. But here's what I think overall the big picture is. Like, there's some questions about Tommy Rees and how good the offense is doing. Well, the offense is, they were kind of thrown into a tough position because Milroe was a tough act to follow. I mean, Bryce Young is probably the best quarterback to ever play at Alabama. Milroe going into that's a tough act to follow. And, and with especially with a new offensive coordinator that's never played with Milroe, never played with him, just trying to find some kind of offensive identity. It took about 3 or 4 or 5 games trying to settle on a quarterback. They didn't know if Simpson was a better quarterback or if Milroe was a better quarterback. Milroe had a bad rap against him with throwing these interceptions, untimely interceptions. So I think Tommy and Alabama's 7-1 and a high-rated offense right now, one of the better-rated offenses in college football. I think Tommy Rees is doing a good job. He had to, like I said, and the last offensive coordinator, his name slips my mind, but he's had a lot of experience in the NFL, a lot of experience in college football. He's coach of Penn State. I mean, he was a good offensive coordinator, a good one. I don't know about a great one, but a good one. And so just Tommy Rees was thrown into a tough position. Milroe was thrown into a tough position. So now the offense is finding its way a little bit. They didn't even have any go-to star receivers. We did have a good running back, and the offensive line has not really gelled or not really started off as a strong point like we thought it was going to be. I think the offensive line is the weakest position, or the weakest group on the team right now. So with that being said, Tommy Rees has done a good job. Milroe's done a good job. These offensive players, these receivers have done a good job not dropping the ball and being open as much as they are. Offensive line's a weak point. And the defense, as far as the defense can only improve. I think our defense was pathetic these past two or three years with Pete Golding. And so there was just only for improvement for them, which they did. So they were in a little easier position to improve. Our offense was thrown into a tough position, following up with Bryce Young, the best player to ever play quarterback at every Alabama. But it's going to be a big game. It's going to be a big game that coming up this weekend at LSU. I mean, honestly, it's going to be a good one. But Bama's got to win out, man. They got to win out. They got to beat Georgia convincingly. Georgia's got to win out. That's Bama's only position to make it to the playoffs. For some reason, they're big on these 2 Pac-10 teams, Washington, Oregon. I'm not sure why. Maybe they're as good as they say they are. Michigan's a bunch of posers. They always were. They always have been. And Ohio State's the only team that can beat Georgia and Alabama. That's just my opinion.
All right. Well, thanks for calling in, Mike. I appreciate all the points, man. Thanks for leading off the show, man. And we'll talk to you next time. Okay.
Absolutely, brother. You take care. Bye.
All right. Mike calling in, hitting on several different points. I did like the point about, the Michigan are posers, because I think when you look to Mike's point, that was Mike from Austin. We'll get to our next callers in just a second, 205 and a 919. Mike bringing up the fact that Bama fatigue and really SEC fatigue does exist. And it's an interesting dichotomy of emotions, I think, for the College Football Playoff Committee, because they know that the ratings are going to be lower without SEC teams in there. However, I think they'd like to see other teams compete for the playoffs, right? You'd like to see a Florida State. They'd like to see a Pac-12 team. And I think the kind of the nightmare scenario for Alabama, and Mike hit on this as well, is the worst case scenario is if Michigan wins out, if Florida State wins out, and Washington wins out, then and Texas comes back and wins the Big 12, which will probably happen, then, and if Alabama was to win out as well, you have an SEC champ that lost to the Big 12 champ, then you have all these undefeated teams, right? Michigan would be undefeated, Florida State would be undefeated, Washington would be undefeated, and then you have Texas who beat Bama head-to-head, so that would be a game where they kind of look back and say head-to-head does matter, and you would have for the first time an SEC team on the outside looking in. You'd have 2 one-loss teams, right? Georgia and Alabama. So I could see kind of that's the worst-case scenario if Michigan, Florida State, and Washington. But with that said, when you look to this board, and I'll get to my callers in just a second, I do think that, you know, some of these teams are going to lose, right? I think that Florida State, I mean, they could slip up against Miami, against Florida, or even in that ACC championship game, which would probably be against Louisville. Louisville and Virginia Tech are second, and they play this coming weekend. Georgia, you know, that game against Tennessee, I know is going to be tough. All these games are going to be tough for them. Missouri, Ole Miss, Tennessee, they've been taking care of business. I'm just saying this is the beginning of their season. Same thing with Michigan on the far left, right? Purdue, Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State. That's the beginning of their schedule. Somebody's got to slip up. And then you look at kind of the teams on this bottom column, Washington, USC, Utah, Oregon State. That's a tough schedule for them. Same thing with Oregon. I think that, I need to update Oregon down there. But Texas plays Kansas State, TCU, Iowa State, Tech, Oklahoma. You know, they play Oklahoma State, West Virginia, BYU. Oklahoma should win out. I think Texas is, you know, Kansas State or TCU is going to be tough for those guys. So I don't know. I want to get to my next caller, but just kind of looking at the playoff scenarios and just, you know, kind of kicking the ball around. That's kind of where it looks, and I'll update that Oregon graphic right now.